January 28th, 1945. Outside Houffalize, Belgium, the wind cuts like a knife through the Ardennes forest. Oberleutnant Franz Dietrich pulls his collar tighter as his boots crunch through knee-deep snow. Each step a small agony in the pre-dawn darkness. Around him, the scattered remnants of Kampfgruppe Müller pick their way through the skeletal remains of what was just weeks ago. The Wehrmacht's last great offensive in the West. The Battle of the Bulge is over. Germany lost. Dietrich knows this, even if the official pronouncements from Berlin refuse to acknowledge it. The evidence surrounds him: burnt-out Panthers abandoned for lack of fuel, frozen corpses half buried in drifts, and the distant rumble of American artillery growing closer each day. His men, boys. Really. Most of them 17 or 18 move like ghosts through the trees, their gray-white winter camouflage making them nearly invisible against the snow. Herr Oberleutnant calls Feldwebel Klaus Zimmermann, his voice barely above a whisper despite the forest's emptiness. The sergeant is pointing down into a ravine where morning light is just beginning to penetrate the mist. Dietrich slides down the embankment, using his Kar 98K rifle as a walking stick. At the bottom, half hidden by snow and stripped pine branches, sits an American tank. Not just any tank, an M4 Sherman, the mechanical backbone of the Allied advance. But this one isn't moving. Its tracks are shattered, victim of either a mine or a Panzerfaust. Blast marks scar its olive drab hull, and the turret sits at an odd angle, frozen mid-rotation. "Check it," Dietrich orders. Zimmermann approaches cautiously, his MP-40 submachine gun raised. The other men fan out, watching the tree line. Everyone knows the Americans rarely abandon equipment without booby traps. Dietrich has seen too many German soldiers blown apart by grenades rigged to tank hatches or artillery pieces. But Zimmermann circles the Sherman without incident. It's clear. Herr Oberleutnant, abandoned, maybe 3-4 days ago. Dietrich climbs onto the engine deck, his frozen fingers struggling with the turret hatch. Inside, the tank smells of oil, cordite, and something else, American cigarettes. Lucky strikes, if he remembers the package correctly from captured supplies. The crew compartment is cramped, far more cramped than a Panther or Tiger. How the Americans fight in these steel coffins, he cannot fathom. His hand brushes against something unexpected. Not the breech of the main gun, not the radio equipment, but a complex assembly of gears and gyroscopes mounted near the gunner's position. Dietrich has been a tank officer since 1941, fought in Russia. Seen the inside of dozens of Soviet T-34S and American Shermans. But this mechanism is unfamiliar. "Zimmermann, get in here." The sergeant squeezes through the turret hatch, his bulky winter coat making the space even tighter. What is it? This? Dietrich points to the gyroscopic assembly, its polished metal surface catching the dim light filtering through the open hatch. "Have you seen anything like this before?" Zimmermann studies it, his weathered face creased in concentration. Before the war, he was a machinist in Stuttgart, familiar with precision instruments. "It's a stabilizer, Herr Oberleutnant, like what we use in aircraft instruments, but much more sophisticated." "For what purpose?" "If I had to guess?" Zimmermann traces the mechanical linkages with his finger, following them to the gun's elevation mechanism. It stabilizes the main gun, compensates for the tank's movement. Dietrich feels something cold settle in his stomach. And it has nothing to do with the soul, the January weather. "Are you telling me this device allows them to fire accurately while moving?" It would explain much, wouldn't it? Zimmerman's voice is quiet, almost reverent. Throughout the Ardennes offensive, German tank crews reported something impossible: American Shermans firing on the move with unexpected accuracy, hitting German armor while both tanks were in motion. The reports were dismissed as combat confusion, the fog of war, the excuse-making of men who didn't want to admit they'd been outfought. But here, in this frozen ravine, lies the truth. Dietrich has commanded Panzer IVs and Panthers. German doctrine demands the tank stop before firing. The gunner needs a stable platform for accuracy. It's fundamental, taught to every tank crew from their first day of training. The thought that the Americans have solved this problem, have created a system that allows firing on the move, seems almost fantastical. We need to document this, Dietrich says. Photographs, technical drawings, everything. Sir, the Americans will be through here in days, maybe hours. Then we work fast. Dietrich pulls himself out of the turret, his mind already racing through the implications. If this technology exists in every Sherman, and if they've had it all along, then German tank doctrine is dangerously obsolete. Every tactical manual, every training guide, every operational plan assumes both tanks must stop to engage effectively. He thinks of the Panther crews lost in the Bulge, men who followed doctrine, who stopped to fire, who became stationary targets for Shermans that never had to stop at all. The Americans weren't just lucky. They had an advantage the Germans didn't even know existed. Gefreiter Paul Weber, barely 19, appears at the top of the ravine. Herr Oberleutnant Artillery, getting closer. The morning air carries the sound now, the distinctive whistle of American 105 mm shells, probably from their mobile artillery following the advance. Dietrich makes a decision. Get Corporal Hartmann. He has the camera from that American reconnaissance jeep we captured. We have 2 hours, maybe 3, to record everything we can about this machine. The work begins immediately. Corporal Ernst Hartmann arrives with a Kodak camera. American-made, liberated from a jeep outside Bastogne 3 weeks earlier. His hands shake not from cold, though the temperature has dropped to -15 Celsius, but from the constant rumble of artillery that grows incrementally closer with each passing minute. Start with overall views. Dietrich instructs, positioning himself outside the tank to give Hartmann a clear line of sight. Then details of the stabilization system, every angle, every connection point. Zimmerman has already begun sketching in a notebook, his pencil moving with practiced precision despite his thick gloves. The gyroscopic stabilizer is more complex than it first appeared, a marvel of engineering that combines mechanical linkages with electrical systems. Small motors respond to the gyroscope's input, making constant micro-adjustments to the gun's elevation even as the tank pitches and rolls over uneven terrain. Inside the Sherman's turret, Dietrich finds the gunner's station and studies the sight picture. The periscope is surprisingly clear. Better optics than the Zeiss equipment in German tanks, if he's honest with himself. But more importantly, there's a switch near the gunner's position labeled simply stab on off. On, off. As simple as that. He thinks of the countless tactical discussions in officers' mess halls, the debates about American armor doctrine, the dismissive comments about Sherman's thin armor and underpowered guns. Tommy Cookers the German crews called them, for how easily they burned when hit. But all that confidence, that certainty of German technical superiority, suddenly feels like whistling past a graveyard. Herr Oberleutnant. Zimmerman calls from deeper in the tank. You should see this. Dietrich squeezes past the turret basket to where Zimmerman is examining the gun breech. The sergeant has found the manufacturer's plate. 75 gun M3 stabilized. Westinghouse Electric Corporation, 1943. 1943. Dietrich repeats slowly. They've had this technology for 2 years. At least in production. Development would have started earlier. 1941, perhaps 1942. The implications cascade through Dietrich's mind like dominoes. While German engineers focused on bigger guns, thicker armor, more powerful engines creating Panthers and Tigers and King Tigers, the Americans solved a different problem entirely. They made their adequate tanks more effective through technology the Germans hadn't even considered worth pursuing. Outside, the artillery sounds closer. Dietrich can hear the distinctive crack thump of shells impacting perhaps 2 kilometers away. Hartmann keeps photographing, his camera clicking methodically. Each photograph uses precious film. But Dietrich doesn't stop him. This information needs to reach someone who can use it, someone in the Heereswaffenamt, the Weapons Procurement Office, or perhaps the Panzer Commission in Berlin. If Berlin still stands by the time this intelligence arrives. There's more, Zimmerman says, pointing to another system near the turret's power traverse mechanism. Hydraulic turret rotation, much faster than our manual traverse. And look here, the gun mount itself. It's designed with the stabilizer as an integral component, not an addition. They built this entire system from the ground up. Dietrich photographs the hydraulic system with his own small camera, a Leica that's been with him since France in 1940. The motor that powers the turret traverse is compact, efficient, connected to the tank's main engine through a series of drives and gearboxes that seem almost elegant in their simplicity. German tanks, even the mighty Tiger, rotate their turrets manually in many situations. The crew straining at the hand cranks to traverse the massive guns. Under combat conditions, it can take 30 seconds or more to rotate a Tiger's turret 180 degrees. This Sherman, with its powered traverse, could do it in less than 15. Speed, mobility, accuracy on the move. The Americans have built their tanks around different values entirely. Weber's voice cuts through the morning air, more urgent now. Sir, I can see them. American armor, on the ridge line, maybe 3 kilometers. Dietrich pulls himself out of the Sherman and scrambles up the ravine's side. Through his binoculars, he can see them, a column of Shermans and half-tracks moving along the frozen road, accompanied by infantry in white winter camouflage. They're advancing cautiously, professionally, clearing each section of forest before moving forward. How much longer do you need? Dietrich asks Hartmann. The corporal checks his camera. 8 more exposures on this roll. 5 minutes to finish, another 5 to sketch the electrical connections. You have 10 minutes total. Then we move. Dietrich slides back into the ravine and takes one last look at the Sherman's interior. The crew stations are cramped but efficiently arranged. The radio equipment is more sophisticated than German sets. He recognizes it as the SCR 528, capable of both voice and radio telegraph communication. Even the seats are better designed, adjustable, with padding that German tank crews would consider a luxury. This tank was built by a nation that expected its soldiers to live, to be comfortable, to have every advantage that engineering could provide. German tanks were built by a nation running out of time, resources, and increasingly, hope. Zimmerman finishes his sketches, carefully folding the pages into his dispatch case. I have enough, Herr Oberleutnant. Dimensions, gear ratios, electrical schematics, assuming I've interpreted them correctly. Photographs, Dietrich asks Hartmann. Complete, 2 full rolls. Then we go north, through the forest. We'll try to reach the rally point at Sankt Vith. The men climb out of the Sherman, leaving it as they found it, a broken machine in the frozen ravine. Silent testimony to a battle that's already passed into history. But now, it's more than just another destroyed tank. It's evidence. Proof that the technological gap between German and American armor is wider than anyone in Berlin wants to admit. As they move through the trees, Dietrich can't help looking back. The Sherman sits there, abandoned and inert, but still menacing in its implications. He thinks of the tank crews he's commanded over 4 years of war. Good men who followed their training, who trusted in German engineering superiority, who stopped to aim and died before they could fire. How many might have lived if someone had understood what the Americans had achieved? The group moves north in tactical formation, spread out to minimize casualties from artillery. The morning sun breaks through the overcast, sending shafts of light through the frozen forest. It's beautiful. In a terrible way, the kind of beauty that makes you remember you're still alive, even as the evidence of death surrounds you on every side. They've gone perhaps half a kilometer when they hear it, the distinctive clank and rumble of American armor, much closer than before. Dietrich signals his men to freeze, to become invisible against the winter landscape. Through the trees, he can see another Sherman, this one very much operational, grinding slowly along a forest path. It's moving, turret traversing smoothly, the gun elevated at a slight angle. And Dietrich knows with absolute certainty that if they're spotted, that tank won't need to stop before firing. It will shoot on the move, accurately, and his small group of men will be torn apart before they can even raise their weapons. The Sherman passes within 50 meters of their position, its engine noise echoing through the frozen forest. Dietrich can see the American crew commander standing in the turret hatch, bundled in a winter jacket, scanning the tree line with binoculars. The tank's tracks throw up rooster tails of snow as it navigates around fallen logs and shell craters. Dietrich's hand rests on his holstered Walther P-38, a gesture of pure futility. What good is a pistol against 30 tons of armor? His men are statues, barely breathing, their winter camouflage blending perfectly with the snow-covered undergrowth. Weber, the youngest, has his eyes squeezed shut, as if not seeing the tank will make it not see them. The Sherman continues forward, oblivious. Its turret swivels smoothly, that hydraulic traverse Zimmerman documented tracking across potential threat areas. The gun never stops moving, never settles, always ready. It's a different philosophy of armored warfare. Entirely constant motion, constant readiness, trusting in technology to compensate for the instability of movement. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably less than 2 minutes, the Sherman disappears around a bend in the forest track. The sound of its engine fades gradually, replaced by the ambient noise of distant artillery and the wind through bare branches. "Move," Dietrich whispers, quickly and quietly. They navigate north through terrain that shows the scars of recent combat. Shell craters pock the landscape, some still smoking faintly. A destroyed Panzer IV sits canted at an angle, its turret blown completely off the signature of an ammunition detonation. Dietrich doesn't look to see if there are bodies inside. After 4 years of war, he's he's learned that some things are better left unexamined. By noon, they've covered perhaps 5 kilometers. It's painfully slow progress, made slower by the need for constant vigilance. American fighter bombers own the skies now. P-47 thunderbolts that swoop down on anything that moves. Their machine guns and rockets turning men and vehicles into burning wreckage. The group moves from cover to cover, always listening for the sound of aircraft engines. They stop to rest in the ruins of a farmhouse. Its walls collapsed from artillery fire. Only the stone chimney still standing like a broken tooth. Zimmermann distributes what food they have: hard bread, frozen cheese, and a small amount of ersatz coffee made from acorns. It tastes terrible, but the warmth is welcome. "How far to St. Vith?" Weber asks, his young face pinched with cold and exhaustion. 20 kilometers, Dietrich replies. "Maybe more. The roads are compromised, so we stay in the forest." "Will anyone be there?" This from Gefreiter Hans Kruger, another veteran who's been with Dietrich since the retreat from Kursk. "The Americans have been advancing. We get there and find out." Dietrich cuts him off. The truth is, he doesn't know. Communications have been sporadic at best since the Bulge collapsed. Entire divisions have been cut off, destroyed, or simply ceased to exist as organized formations. His own unit, what's left of it, is scattered across 50 kilometers of forest. Hartmann is cleaning his camera, carefully removing snow and condensation from the lens. "Sir, even if we reach our lines, will anyone believe what we found? The reports about American tanks firing on the move, they've been dismissed before. We have photographs, technical drawings, physical evidence. We had reports from the front, too. Combat observations. They were ignored." Dietrich knows Hartmann is right. The German High Command has a long history of dismissing intelligence that doesn't fit their preconceptions. In 1941, they ignored warnings about Soviet production capacity. In 1943, they dismissed reports of the T-34's sloped armor effectiveness. Now, in 1945, they've been ignoring evidence that American tank technology has evolved beyond German understanding. "Then we make them believe," Dietrich says, with more confidence than he feels. "We present the evidence to someone who can't afford to ignore it. Someone in the Panzer Commission, or the testing grounds at Kummersdorf. Assuming Kummersdorf still exists, assuming Berlin hasn't fallen, assuming any of this matters anymore. They rest for 20 minutes, then continue north. The afternoon brings fresh snow. Light at first, then heavier. It covers their tracks, which is good, but it also makes navigation more difficult. Dietrich uses his compass to maintain their heading, but in the forest, with no clear landmarks, it's easy to drift off course. Around 1500 hours. They hear gunfire ahead, the sharp crack of rifles and the deeper stutter of machine guns. Dietrich signals his men to ground and crawls forward to investigate. Through the snow and trees, he can see a small firefight in progress. American infantry, perhaps a platoon, engaged with what looks like a German rearguard position. The German position is weak, a hasty defensive line behind fallen logs and shallow scrapes in the frozen earth. Dietrich counts perhaps a dozen men, armed with rifles and a single MG-42 machine gun. They're firing in short, disciplined bursts, conserving ammunition. The Americans are advancing by fire and movement, professional and methodical, using their numerical advantage to flank the position. "We could help them," Zimmermann says quietly, having crawled up beside Dietrich. "With 6 men against an American platoon. They're Germans, our comrades." Dietrich watches through his binoculars as the inevitable unfolds. The American flanking element gets into position. A Browning automatic rifle opens up, and the German machine gun falls silent. Seconds later, white flags appear under shirts tied to rifles, waving in surrender. The Americans accept the surrender professionally. No one shoots the Germans as they emerge from their positions. Hands raised, they're searched, lined up, marched to the rear, POWs now. Their war over. Part of Dietrich envies them no more fighting. No more frozen marches. Just survival until this catastrophe ends. But he has a mission. Information that needs to reach someone who can use it. We go around, Dietrich says. Wide circle, at least a kilometer. The detour costs them 2 more hours of daylight. By the time they're clear of the American position, dusk is falling. The forest becomes a maze of shadows and snow. Every tree trunk potentially hiding an enemy. Every sound magnified by darkness and fear. They're moving through a particularly dense section of forest when Weber, on point, raises his fist, the signal to freeze. Everyone drops. Weapons ready. For a long moment, there's nothing. Then Dietrich hears it voices, speaking German. He moves forward cautiously and finds Weber crouched behind a massive oak tree, pointing ahead, through the gathering darkness. Dietrich can see lights, carefully shielded lanterns, and the shapes of men moving around several vehicles. German vehicles, a SDKF's 251 half-track, and what looks like a Kubelwagen field car. Friendly, Zimmerman whispers. Only one way to find out. Dietrich stands slowly, deliberately making noise. Deutsche Wehrmacht, he calls out. Don't shoot. The response is immediate weapons trained in their direction. Sharp commands to identify themselves. Dietrich does, giving his rank, unit, and last known position. There's a tense moment of verification. Then a figure emerges from the vehicles, a Hauptmann, a captain, wearing the insignia of a panzer unit. Oberleutnant Dietrich, we thought your Kampfgruppe was destroyed at Hufalies. Most of it was. We're what's left. The captain, his name is Steiner. Dietrich learns commands a small logistics unit trying to evacuate supplies and personnel ahead of the American advance. He has fuel, food, and most importantly, functioning vehicles. Sankt Vith fell 3 days ago. Steiner informs them over a quick meal of hot soup. The Americans are consolidating their positions. The entire front is collapsing back toward Germany. Where are you heading? Prum, then across the Ahr River into the Reich, if we can make it before the bridges are demolished. Steiner eyes Dietrich's small group. You're welcome to join us. We have room. Dietrich thinks of the film in Hartmann's camera, the sketches in Zimmerman's dispatch case, the intelligence they've gathered. We need to reach a signals unit or a command post. This information needs to get to Berlin. Steiner's laugh is bitter. Berlin, Oberleutnant. Berlin is being bombed into rubble. The entire Nazi leadership is living in bunkers. If you have intelligence, you'd better hope someone survives long enough to read it. They travel through the night in Steiner's half-track. The vehicle's engine straining against the snow-clogged roads. Dietrich sits in the crew compartment, surrounded by boxes of documents and equipment being evacuated ahead of the American advance. The motion of the vehicle, combined with exhaustion, should put him to sleep. But his mind won't stop racing. He keeps thinking about the Sherman's gyroscopic stabilizer, about the elegant engineering solution to a problem German designers never seriously attempted to solve. More troubling is the question of why. Why didn't German engineers pursue this technology? They had the capability. German optics are world-class. German precision engineering unmatched. The gyroscopes in German aircraft instruments are sophisticated enough. The answer, Dietrich suspects, lies in doctrine and assumption. German armored warfare evolved from the blitzkrieg concept, violent shock, rapid maneuver, overwhelming force at the decisive point. German tanks were designed to smash through enemy lines, to create breakthroughs that mechanized infantry could exploit. In that context, stopping to fire seemed natural. Even necessary a brief pause in the advance to eliminate resistance before continuing forward. But the Americans fought differently. Their doctrine emphasized firepower and mobility as simultaneous advantages, not sequential ones. They built tanks that could shoot while moving because they understood that in modern warfare, the side that fires effectively first wins. It's not about the biggest gun or the thickest armor. It's about hitting the enemy before he hits you. Simple, obvious in hindsight, and something the Wehrmacht failed to understand until it was far too late. The half-track lurches through a particularly deep drift, jolting Dietrich from his thoughts. Zimmermann sits across from him, the dispatch case with the technical drawings clutched to his chest like a talisman. The sergeant's eyes are closed, but Dietrich knows he's not sleeping. None of them are truly sleeping anymore. They exist in a state of exhausted alertness, always listening for the sound of aircraft engines or incoming artillery. Roadblock ahead. The driver calls back. Feldgendarmerie. The military police the chain dogs. Soldiers call them, for the metal gorgets they wear around their necks. In the early years of the war, they directed traffic and maintained order. Now, in 1945, they've become something darker enforcers who hang deserters from trees and shoot stragglers on suspicion of cowardice. The half-track slows to a stop. Through the open rear hatch, Dietrich can see the checkpoint, a log barrier across the road. Several armed men. And something that makes his blood run cold, a body hanging from a nearby tree. A placard around its neck reading, "I abandoned my post." A Feldgendarmerie Oberfeldwebel approaches the half-track, his gorget gleaming in the light of a kerosene lantern. "Papers," he demands. "Where are you coming from? Where are you going?" Steiner handles the interrogation with practiced ease, presenting movement orders and authorization documents. The chain dog examines them with exaggerated care, clearly suspicious of any vehicle moving away from the front rather than toward it. "And these men," he gestures toward Dietrich's group, "survivors from Kampfgruppe Müller. I'm evacuating them along with critical supplies. Survivors or deserters?" The Oberfeldwebel's hand rests on his holstered Luger. "We've had problems with soldiers abandoning their units, trying to slip back to Germany ahead of the enemy." Dietrich feels anger rising in his throat, but forces it down. This officious fool has probably never heard a shot fired in anger, has spent the war harassing German soldiers while claiming to maintain discipline. But arguing with the Feldgendarmerie is a quick way to join the corpse hanging from the tree. "We were cut off during the American counteroffensive," Dietrich says evenly. "We're carrying intelligence that needs to reach higher command." Intelligence. The Oberfeldwebel's skepticism is obvious. Everyone claims to have important intelligence. Usually it's just an excuse to run away. Steiner leans down from the driver's compartment. "Oberfeldwebel, we're on a tight schedule. The bridges over the Aue are scheduled for demolition at 0400 hours. If we don't move now, you'll move when I say you can move." The chain dog steps closer to the half-track, peering at each man in turn. His gaze lingers on Weber, the youngest, barely old enough to shave. You. How old are you? 19. Herr Oberfeldwebel. You look 16. Where's your unit? Destroyed at Hofelis. I'm the only survivor, convenient. The Oberfeldwebel pulls out a notebook. Name, rank, serial number. I'm placing you under arrest pending investigation for desertion. He's not a deserter. Zimmerman's voice is sharp, almost insubordinate. He fought at Ufelis, at Bastogne before that. He has more combat experience than. The Luger comes out of its holster with practiced speed, pointed directly at Zimmerman. Did I ask for your opinion? Feldwebel, on more word, and you'll join him. The moment stretches out, taut as a wire. Dietrich calculates the odds: 6 exhausted men with rifles against 4 Feldgendarmerie with submachine guns and the authority to execute anyone they deem a deserter. The mathematics of the situation are simple and brutal. Then Steiner speaks, his voice carrying an authority that cuts through the tension. Oberfeldwebel, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. I am a staff officer attached to LX6 Army Corps, personally known to General Lucht. These men are under my protection, carrying intelligence directly relevant to ongoing operations. If you delay us further, I will ensure that General Lucht knows exactly who to blame when critical information fails to reach his headquarters. It's a magnificent bluff, delivered with absolute conviction. Dietrich has no idea if Steiner actually knows any generals, but the Oberfeldwebel doesn't know either. For a long moment, the chain dog weighs his options, assert his authority, and risk the wrath of a corps commander, or back down and lose face. Pragmatism wins. The Luger goes back in its holster. Move along, but I'm noting this incident in my report. You do that. Steiner signals the driver, and the half-track lurches forward. They clear the checkpoint and continue into the darkness. No one speaks for several minutes. Finally, Weber lets out a shaky breath. Thank you. Herr Hauptmann, I thought. Don't think about it. Steiner says. Just another symptom of a dying army. The real soldiers are dead or captured. What's left are either the very best or the very worst, with not much in between. Dietrich looks at the dispatch case in Zimmerman's hands. They've risked everything to preserve this intelligence, this evidence of American technological superiority. But what good will it do even if they reach a command post? Even if someone with authority reads their report and studies the photographs? What can Germany do with this information? The factories are being bombed around the clock. Raw materials are scarce. The fuel needed to run tanks barely exists anymore. The Wehrmacht of 1945 can't build new tanks with gyroscopic stabilizers. It can barely keep the tanks it has running. But perhaps the information has value beyond immediate military application. Perhaps someone, somewhere, needs to understand how thoroughly Germany has been out-engineered, out-thought, out-innovated. Not just defeated by superior numbers or resources, but intellectually surpassed by enemies they'd dismissed as mechanically inferior. The Americans with their mass-produced Shermans, designed for reliability and ease of manufacture, equipped with technology that makes them more effective than Germany's carefully handcrafted Panthers. The Soviets, with their T-34s crude but produced by the tens of thousands, sloped armor concepts that German engineers initially dismissed as impractical. Even the British, with their specialized tank variants, bridge layers and flamethrowers and mine clearers showing a flexibility of thinking that German rigid doctrine couldn't match. Germany lost the war not on the battlefield but in the design bureaus and factories. in the failure to imagine that other nations might approach armored warfare with different assumptions and different solutions. The half-track grinds on through the night, carrying men and machines and knowledge westward, away from the advancing Americans, toward a Germany that grows smaller and more desperate with each passing day. Dawn finds them approaching the Our River, the natural boundary between Belgium and Germany. The bridges are still standing, guarded by engineers with demolition charges already in place. Once the last German units cross, the bridges will be blown, buying perhaps a few hours or days before the Americans force a crossing. Steiner presents his papers to the bridge guards, and they're waved through without incident. The half-track's tracks clatter across the wooden decking. And then they're in Germany proper. The Reich, the fatherland. A nation that's been at war for nearly 6 years and shows the strain in every bombed-out village and cratered road. Welcome home, Steiner says, without irony or joy. Such as it is. February 3rd, 1945. Wiesbaden, Germany. 6 days of travel through a collapsing nation has brought them here a requisitioned hotel on the outskirts of Wiesbaden, temporarily housing elements of the Heereswaffenamt, the Army Weapons Office. The building still has most of its windows, which makes it luxurious by current standards. The roads leading here were clogged with refugees fleeing westward, civilians pushing carts loaded with possessions, children crying from cold and hunger, old men who remember the last time foreign armies invaded German soil. Dietrich stands in a converted ballroom that now serves as an intelligence assessment center. Maps cover the walls, showing the shrinking perimeter of the Reich in red lines that move inexorably inward. Officers cluster around tables, processing reports, trying to make sense of a strategic situation that grows more hopeless by the hour. Major Werner Holtzmann, the officer assigned to review their findings, is 45 years old with the lean, precise manner of a professional engineer. He wears glasses and has ink stains on his fingers, more scientist than soldier. Before the war, he worked for Henschel, designing tank suspensions. Now he serves as a technical liaison between combat units and the weapons development bureaus. Hartmann's photographs are spread across a table, alongside Zimmermann's technical drawings. Holtzmann examines each one with meticulous care, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper. He's been silent for nearly 20 minutes, and Dietrich has learned not to interrupt. Finally, Holtzmann looks up. "Where exactly did you find this, Sherman?" "Hufvudstadt sector, January 28th. The tank had been disabled, abandoned approximately 4 days prior based on the condition of the interior." "And you're certain this gyro stabilization system is original equipment, not a field modification?" The manufacturer's plate indicates it was factory installed. Westinghouse Electric, 1943. Dietrich slides one of the photographs across the table. The entire gun mount is designed to accommodate the stabilizer. It's integral to the system, not an afterthought. Holtzmann nods slowly, studying the image. "We've had reports, of course. Combat observations from the Ardennes. From Normandy before that. American tanks firing accurately while in motion. But the reports were inconsistent, easy to dismiss as exaggeration or misidentification." "They weren't exaggerations," Zimmermann says quietly. "The technology exists. It works. And based on the production date, they've had it operational for at least 2 years, probably longer. Which raises uncomfortable questions." Holtzmann removes his glasses and cleans them with a handkerchief. "We've been testing gyroscopic gun stabilization since 1938. Early prototypes on the Panzer IV showed promise. But the project was cancelled in 1942 due to complexity concerns and resource allocation priorities. The room falls silent. Dietrich feels something cold settle in his chest, not surprise. Exactly. But a kind of bitter confirmation. Germany had the technology within reach and chose not to pursue it. While American engineers solved the problem and put stabilized guns into production, German engineers declared it too complicated and moved on to other projects. Why? Dietrich asked. Why cancel it? The official reason was that stopping to fire provided adequate accuracy, and that German optical rangefinders and gunner training were superior to any mechanical stabilization system. The unofficial reason. Holtzman pauses, choosing his words carefully. The unofficial reason is that no one in authority believed such a system was necessary. Our doctrine emphasized breakthrough and exploitation, not sustained mobile combat. And there was an assumption largely unstated but widely held that German engineering was inherently superior to American mass production techniques. Arrogance, Steiner says flatly. He's been listening from near the door, smoking a cigarette. We assumed our way was the only way, the best way. We didn't seriously consider that the Americans might approach the problem differently and find a better solution. Holtzman doesn't disagree. He returns his attention to the photographs, studying the hydraulic turret traverse mechanism. The integrated approach is fascinating. They've designed the entire fire control system around the assumption of mobile combat. Power traverse, gyrostabilization. Superior optics, each element reinforces the others. It's a holistic design philosophy. Can we replicate it? Dietrich asks, though he already knows the answer. Technically, yes. We have the engineering capability, the theoretical knowledge, but practically. Holtzman gestures toward the window, where the distant rumble of bombing can be heard. Our factories are being systematically destroyed. We're short of everything steel, copper, rubber, fuel, skilled labor. Even if we started designing a stabilized gun system today, it would take years to move from prototype to production. Years we don't have. The words hang in the air like a death sentence. All their effort, all the risk taken to bring this intelligence back. And it arrives too late to matter. Germany's war is ending not with a dramatic final battle, but with a slow collapse of industrial capacity and military coherence. So what happens now? Weber asks. The young soldier has been silent through most of the briefing, overwhelmed by the technical discussion and the presence of staff officers. What was the point of all this? It's a fair question, and Holtzman takes it seriously. The point, Gefreiter, is understanding. Even if we can't act on this intelligence immediately, we need to document it, preserve it, ensure that someone learns from our mistakes. Wars are won and lost based on technological and doctrinal decisions made years before the first shot is fired. Germany lost this war in the design bureaus of 1938 and 1939, when we committed to certain approaches and dismissed alternatives. He picks up one of the photographs showing the gyroscopic stabilizer in detail. This information will be compiled into a technical report. Copies will be distributed to surviving military archives, hopefully to survive the war's end. Whoever comes after us, whoever rebuilds Germany's military capability, if anyone does, they'll need to understand what works and what doesn't. They'll need to know that American armored doctrine succeeded not because of numbers alone, but because of technological innovation integrated into a coherent tactical system. A lesson for the next war, Dietrich says quietly. Hopefully a lesson that prevents the next war, or at least ensures we don't make the same mistakes. Holtzmann begins gathering the photographs and drawings into a folder. You did good work, Oberleutnant. This is valuable intelligence, even if it arrives too late for immediate tactical application. I'll ensure it's properly documented and preserved. The dismissal is clear but not unkind. Dietrich salutes and leads his men from the ballroom back into the hotel's lobby, where displaced officers and clerks rush between rooms, processing the endless paperwork of a disintegrating army. Outside, the February afternoon is cold but clear. Somewhere to the west, the Americans are advancing. Somewhere to the east, the Soviets are doing the same. And here, in what remains of Germany, the military bureaucracy continues its work, even as the Reich crumbles around it. Steiner finds them in the hotel's dining room. Such as it is watery soup and black bread, but hot and more than they've had in weeks. So, the Hauptmann says, settling into a chair with his own bowl. What will you do now? Report to whatever remains of our unit. Dietrich replies, if it still exists. If not, we'll be reassigned. And continue fighting. What else is there? Steiner doesn't answer immediately. He eats his soup slowly, methodically, like a man who knows that meals are no longer guaranteed. I'm being sent to organize supply depots in Bavaria. Rear area logistics, far from the fighting. There's room for experienced NCOs. If your Feldwebel is interested, safer than the front lines, and the work needs doing. Zimmerman looks at Dietrich, a question in his eyes. The offer is tempting survival, a chance to see Germany's defeat from relative safety rather than from a foxhole or tank turret. But there's also something else, something harder to articulate, the sense that, having seen what they've seen, having understood what they've understood, they have an obligation to see it through to the end. Thank you, Herr Hauptmann. Zimmerman says finally, but I'll stay with my unit, what's left of it. The others nod in agreement. Even Weber, who has every reason to seek safety, chooses to remain. They've become a unit unto themselves through shared experience and shared knowledge. They've seen the future of armored warfare. And while they can't change the outcome of this war, they can at least bear witness to its ending. That evening, Dietrich writes a letter, not an official report, but a personal account of what they found in that frozen ravine outside Hufvliese. He describes the Sherman stabilization system in detail. But more importantly, he describes what it means, not just a mechanical advantage, but a philosophical one. A different way of thinking about armored combat that the Wehrmacht failed to anticipate or counter. He doesn't know if the letter will survive the war, if anyone will ever read it, if it will matter to anyone beyond himself. But he writes it anyway, because someone needs to document not just what happened, but why it happened. Someone needs to understand that Germany was defeated not merely by superior numbers or resources, but by superior thinking, by enemies who approached problems with fresh eyes and innovative solutions. The letter concludes, we found the evidence of our defeat inside an abandoned American tank. Not defeat in a single battle or campaign, but defeat in the fundamental assumptions that guided our military development for years before the war began. We believed our way was the only way, our technology the best technology, our doctrine unassailable. The Americans believed something different. They believed that technology should serve tactical needs, that doctrine should evolve with capabilities, that innovation matters more than tradition. They were right. We were wrong. And 30 million people have paid the price for our arrogance. He seals the letter and places it in his dispatch case alongside his other documents. Tomorrow they'll move out, heading east to find whatever remains of their parent unit. The war has perhaps 3 months left, maybe 4, and somewhere out there, more Shermans with their gyroscopic stabilizers are rolling forward. Accurate fire on the move, advancing into the heart of a Reich that never truly understood what it was fighting against. Outside the window, the first stars appear in a clear winter sky. Inside the requisitioned hotel, men who know they're losing prepare to continue fighting anyway, because that's what soldiers do. And in a folder on Major Holtzman's desk, photographs of American technology sit waiting to be archived, preserved, studied, a testament to innovation and a reminder that wars are won long before the first shot is fired. In the quiet work of engineers and the bold decisions of those willing to challenge convention, the gyroscopic stabilizer that Franz Dietrich found in a frozen ravine would outlive the Third Reich. The technology would evolve, improve, become standard in tanks around the world. And decades later, military historians would note that the Sherman stabilization system represented not just a tactical advantage, but a turning point in armored warfare, the moment when technology began enabling new doctrines rather than merely supporting old ones. But on this February evening in 1945, Dietrich knows none of this. He knows only that he has seen the future, documented it, and survived to tell the tale. It will have to be enough.